Architecture is evolving fast. In this episode, I'm joined by Brian Corcadillo, CEO of Design Blends, to unpack how AI, 3D design, and virtual reality and augmented reality are transforming how we build, live, and collaborate. From cost-cutting visualizations to the rise of virtual spaces and AI agents, this is the future of architecture, where physical meets digital and ideas are immersive. If you care about where design is headed, you don't want to miss this. What's the most profound thing you've seen change in the last 10 years running this business?
It's a great question. I think it's definitely the intersection of the built and virtual world by far. My company, we help people create beautiful images of things that don't exist yet. And that technology has continued to advance and advance. And, the images and things we look at in magazines, there's a good chance they were created with, computer generated images or CGI. But when you combine that power with making things look real and overlap that with architecture, interior design, and engineering, you start to create really, create and solve, problems for clients all around the nation.
Is it cost effective to do these kinds of designs? Surely it's very difficult to do and requires a lot of people and time.
Because I get that question all the time. Oh, this is more expensive. Why would I pay for that? And when visualization is one thing, and you see that in movies, but when my company, we apply it just, specifically to buildings, right? So if we're designing a building and, we go through the entire schematic design process, we're picking out materials, finishes, and we don't know what it's going to look like at the end of the day, you can end up spending 100x what it would cost to visualize something when you want to rip out tile because you don't like the way it looks in real life. So what we tell our clients is you're either going to pay for it now or you're going to more than pay for it later during construction. And look, the visualization is just a piece of it. When we're designing buildings, we're doing everything in 3D and, we're able to quantify the building because we know how many sheets of drywall, 2x4s, how much concrete, things like that. We can start quantifying the building and making decisions way earlier on before we get to the field and find a problem.
So you're not just laying out the inside, you're actually doing the foundational work for the client to make sure that they know what they're trying to build. So you're in essence developing the floor plan so that they can tell this to whoever is going to be providing the license for them.
Great question. Like what is it actually we're doing, right? So, traditionally as an architect, and you can look at, I love going on looking like old pictures of architects like slaving over top of like, big drafting tables, right? Working all night long, drawing single line weights, right, on paper. That's always the export, right? The single line weights. And like, that's what we submit to townships and cities to get permits. But behind that, in the virtual world, not on paper, those line weights have depth to them, right? So when I'm drawing a wall, or I don't get to do much anymore. They don't let me touch drawings. But when my team's drawing walls, right, there's 3D components to that. That wall contains exterior cladding. That wall has, drywall. It has insulation. It has studs, all within that parameter. So that 2D line work you see on paper that has the exact, the dimension, right, of that line work, but behind it, we're now quantifying what's in that wall, and we're using that 3D environment to run clash detections to see if HVAC ducts or soffits or plumbing components are buildable before, we get out into the field and realize that, hey, this plumbing pipe runs right into a steel beam. Now you have a $30,000 to $100,000 change order.
I can definitely understand the value in trying to save money if you're building things at scale. You said that there's studs and drywall and all of these things. Are these is every stud put in one at a time into this design? Like how detailed, how precise, how long does it take to make this kind of stuff?
So the level of detail depends on the type of project, right? If we're doing a single family home, we might not put as much detail into the 3D model that's needed. It's still going to have 3D components. You're still going to want to make sure soffits and things line up. But a 2-3 story home is very simple compared to a, municipal complex, right? Police, EMS, fire, right? So there's more complexities the bigger the building gets and the more expensive the building, right? So certain uses, facilities management, things like that have more components to that building than a residential home. So the detail of that 3D model does change depending on the type of use. But we also want to make sure, right, to your point, it's cost effective for people to do this. So we don't think our pricing is any more egregious than any other firm out there. We're actually somewhere in the middle. And with us, you get the same, you get even more support and technology behind you and innovation in the architectural profession.
How is AI affecting that work?
It's interesting. Right now there's places you can go, insert a 2D image, right, of line work and say, hey, make it look like X, Y, and Z, and it'll spit something out. It'll look cool, and to most people that might suffice. One of the things, at least on our visualization side, why we get hired to do that is for some of the largest and most expensive real estate in the world, because when you're selling a $3-4 million condo, the view out to the mountains in Telluride, Colorado matters for somebody, right? You can't sell a fake view at that level. You can't say this is what the kitchen's going to look like and then put in a different faucet. It might fly on a smaller residential or apartment, right? You're trying to lease an apartment, that's different. But our team gets brought in when stuff has to look 100% accurate with no room for error. There's no 98% accurate in our visualizations.
So are you sending someone to go take a picture from the foundation of the building that hasn't been built yet of what the mountain's going to look like 10 stories high, and the AI just knows how to put it in correctly?
Yeah, great question. So it's actually a combination of things. The software we use to model the virtual world is what they use to create movies in. So like Game of Thrones, when you see those scenes where they have a drone flying over the beautiful mountaintops of Ireland, right? And then you see the horses and the dragons and all that. That technology of how to create that is, we're using those same software packages and things, but we apply that to real estate mainly and some product stuff. But essentially, if we're doing a shot of the building from the street level looking up, we'll make sure we have a street view of what's currently there with the surrounding context, and then we can drop in the new proposed rendering or virtual world on top of that existing image. So that's one way we do it. We also do that with drone, right? So we have still shots. We can take a still shot of the city from above looking down at the site, and then superimpose the virtual new buildings that are going to be there someday into it to make it look like it's already there and done. The other thing that gets exciting is we do some drone, like I mentioned with the Game of Thrones, right? We do drone pathing. So if we fly a drone out there looking at the site or through a community, we can then superimpose that virtual world on top. So it's almost like it comes to life as you're flying through it, but it doesn't exist yet. But it looks like it's there. And that's the challenging part for clients. They're like, wait a second, you can make this look done. And that's where we say, yeah, that's why we're still in business. We make things look like they're done before they even start.
So are you essentially building like a Google Street View, but inside of a building, and the building doesn't exist?
Yeah. So essentially, yeah, like that's a great way to look at it, right? When you go to Google Street View and you can like go in that restaurant, right? And what they have is a system. One of the ones that's pretty mainstream is called Matterport. It's like a 360 camera. You set it and it does like circles throughout the space. You can kind of hop from point to point to look at it. That's exactly what we do, but before the building's built, right? So we're generating and creating all those virtual elements, everything you see on the table settings, on the walls, the floors, that's all modeled in a virtual world. One of the things I always tell people, because again, part of my job when I'm talking to clients or new potential clients, I'm educating them, because this concept's still new to people. They still don't realize that a lot of the images we see around us might not be real or might not have been made. One of the realities is everyone knows IKEA, and IKEA is a massive company at this point globally. But if you open up an IKEA magazine, you're flipping through, you're like, oh my God, that kitchen looks beautiful. Look at those bathrooms. Look at this. All those images are not real. They are they were made in the virtual world and then put out there like they're done. So that's always why you can never get your bathroom or kitchen to look as good as that rendering, because it's like, it's almost perfect. Like it's the perfect layout. And that's what my team here at Design Blends gets to do. We get to create beautiful things that look real.
I'm going to throw you a curveball.
Yep.
There's this idea that at some point we will be able to upload our brains digitally and not need a body. Or if you're about to die, you can upload yourself and you could live forever in the cloud. Mm-hmm. Do you want to be the one building the buildings that they're going to live in?
I sometimes joke to my architects and interior designers. I say, how much longer do we actually have to do this for? And, what I mean by that, at a certain point, the overlap of the virtual world, right? Whether it's we're living in ether, we're moving beyond ourselves, or in the present day, that building environment is going to be very basic. What's going to actually become more complex is that virtual overlay, or, people might know it as like augmented reality around us, right? That's where I think things are about to get very interesting, right? Oh, snap my finger. Let's make it look like Hanukkah celebration today. Oh, and my friends who are Christian, they're coming over. We're going to make this room look like it was decorated for Christmas. There's the tree over in the corner. But in reality, it's a blank space. And I think that technology is coming, and there's people that are actively moving. You see the biggest brands in the world, like Apple, right? And Meta this week just announced, something they're dropping with Oakley coming up here shortly, right? So, there's those companies are working towards it. I'm not trying to create that stuff. I'm just trying to become the Angry Birds app that implements the technology between the built world and the virtual world, and do that better than anybody else. Because how we're moving, right? You're not just going to be able to hire an architect to do your buildings much longer. They're going to have to draw it up and do basics, but like that building's only as good as what the virtual world is doing to it and around it. And I think that's a scary thing for some people to realize, but it's coming at a rapid pace. And like, even when Apple dropped their first headset, I must have got like 30, 40 text messages like, Brian, how'd you know like this augmented thing, it was coming? I was like, it's not that I knew it was coming. It's because of just how the world's moving, right? We have a whole virtual world that people are living in, and we have the physical world around it. It's only a matter of time till those two things start truly intersecting. And, right now the intersection is our cell phones, right? This is the virtual world all around us every day. Wait till we don't need this. And that's the interesting part that I'm excited to be part of and shake up a little bit.
Yeah, I know that's what Meta and Apple have been working on, is what's after smartphones. And they've tried these sunglasses, they've tried these headsets. I remember back in 2020 when my company was working on an enterprise collaboration system that was meant to rival Slack. And we were looking at VR and AR headsets. We were thinking about, what if the future of collaboration is virtual? And how can we build something right now that works for that? And it was especially important to us in that moment because COVID had just started. And we had built a deck for our next round around the idea of building for VR and building for AI. And this is years before ChatGPT was released. So we were thinking we would have to raise $100 million just to be able to do these two things. And that was the foundational step to do these things. And that it would be hundreds of millions or billions of dollars more just to be able to make it something that would work. And luckily for me, the company failed, so I don't have to go and actually execute that. But it was before the public was ready for it.
And it's not even that, right? Like, of course it failed. And the reason why is because the biggest companies in the world you're going up against. You're going up against billions of dollars in cash reserves. It's hard to mess up when you have billions of dollars in cash reserves. It really is. So, there's people, and you saw it in a brief stint during the whole crypto boom, the NFTs, where people were creating these metaverses that we're going to live within, right? Like the Centraland, Bored Ape Yacht Club, right? All these companies that got a lot of money to do it, they didn't get enough. It's because I think you're going to see it from, one of three companies are going to figure it out. I predict it's either Apple, Google, or OpenAI. One of those companies is going to get it right. And, I have my money on Zuck's because you don't bet against it. You always bet for the jockey, right? Who's the jockey that's going to win? I think Zuck's going to figure it out because I think he has the mass adoption of the social network. His MetaQuest 3 is super successful. If you haven't put on a MetaQuest 3, you're missing out. Just fun. Like literally just fun. And, if you put on a MetaQuest 3 compared to Apple's ridiculously overpriced headset, you're like, why would I pay for this when I have this option in front of me? Zuck's still very far ahead.
They're designed differently. So I bought a MetaQuest. I bought one of them in 2020 because I was like, yeah, we need to figure this out. I need to try this thing. Greg, how am I supposed, like just right now what I'm doing with AI, with using all these different tools and using them in my business, how am I supposed to understand how to utilize this tool for a segment of customers if I don't know how it works? And so I bought it and I was using it, and I used it I burn through the battery at least once or twice a day because the batteries are awful. But what I learned in the process of trying to be productive with a VR headset was that screw it, let's play games. and I realized actually I was wrong. Humans are never going to use VR to collaborate like that. Maybe they'll use AR. But if you've got a VR headset on for hours, it hurts your neck and you're cut off from your reality. So how are you supposed to get anything done? The degrees of free or the angle, was it degrees of freedom in the eyes is not high enough, and they're not strong. It was like 1080p. Now it's like, I think 2K. But the worst problem being the battery is only 60 to 75 minutes. And the thing weighs like half a pound.
To that point, Sean, one of the things we've seen with clients, and again, right, they always say the technology's there, then it's like when you got to predict when the actual mass adoption occurs, right? The technology is there. But what's interesting is, like, I actually don't think the adoption happens. I think the people that are going to adopt it right now, unfortunately, are 12 to 16 years old. I came from a video game background, right? Like, I used to play professionally when it wasn't cool, and I was the nerd. Right now, today, kids are, have pink hair and are playing, making millions of dollars. Like I refer to Ninja, right? The guy that's like the Fortnite master makes millions of dollars a year playing video games. Amazing. Great for him. I was born a decade too early. But those kids are going to be the ones that can put on that headset and not get motion sickness like my 58-year-old client that's building their new dream home, right? So like I put my client in there that didn't grow up playing video games, saw it was cool. Maybe their kids play, right? But they put on a headset, they get sick. They get motion sickness. So like they're never going to put it on even for anything, like ever. Like they'll never touch it for the next 40 years of their lives. So the difference is I think we have to predict who's going to be in this environment and what those devices are going to be. I think it has something to do with wearables for a time being. I think, to me, the Oakley and Meta collaboration is probably the best. The only other one that's out there that has a shot at it that's in the built world already doing it is Leapfrog, where they essentially have a device that you can be on site through the augmented reality glass environment. You can see components of buildings existing, so you can see if your drawings are matching up to what's going on in the field. That's a cool piece of tech. My fear is like it doesn't have enough computing power behind it to do what's needed to make rooms look real around you. And I think Meta, Oakley, and Google have, and Apple have, the resources to blow past Leapfrog, or maybe they'll just buy them at a certain point. Someone will own them. But those are really the only companies doing it at the highest levels right now that I've seen.
The thing for me about Meta Quest is that the graphics are so childish. They're like Nintendo graphics. And I've loved Nintendo my whole life, but I stopped using a Switch because I bought a PS5 because the graphics are mature and realistic, which is what I want. So I will play with my Meta Quest, but I won't live in it and I won't work in it. And if it became more realistic, like if they were to start showing things that were Unreal 5 plus version quality of graphics, I might reconsider it. But at least for now, there's no value in it for me other than Beat Saber and mini golf.
You have to, it's going to come. And that's what's excited for me. I definitely know that day will come. Those companies will get more and more real, right? Like I equate it back to the cell phone, right? We grew up in that age, right? Like the first cell phone was like, oh my God, you could play this game called Snake on it. It's like,
yeah,
right? Like we all did that, right? And you just see what it is today. You could literally run your company from your cell phone on the same thing that you used to play Snake on, right? So I think that headsets will get there. What's going to predict that and how fast that comes? You got to be watching what NVIDIA is doing. And that's who creates, one of the things I get asked all the time is like, what is NVIDIA? Why are they so valuable, Brian? Why were you buying stock of NVIDIA years ago? I would say because I have racks of NVIDIA graphics cards in my closets here, right? That's what creates that virtual world and those chips and that processing speed of the GPUs. Like you have to watch what NVIDIA is doing and their technology and how rapidly things are shrinking, but also as it shrinks, like what's the percent extra power that's able to come behind it. So it's kind of like you have these other companies out there, but they're using NVIDIA products to make their devices too. Some of them should, like Apple tries to create their own. They're idiots. They should be working with NVIDIA at the highest levels to figure it out, right? you want to keep an eye on a company like NVIDIA because they're light years ahead from any of the other ones. So as their chips progress, that's going to progress the virtual world around us.
I think adoption is going to come when you can compute with contacts in your eyes. When you don't need sunglasses, you don't need a VR headset. All of that power is packed into something that you put on top of your eye.
Yeah. My fear with that, Sean, and I trust me, I've thought about that too. The quick in and out of reality for me, just I don't think that mass adoption we're going to see in our lifetime for contacts. Glasses, absolutely. I think glasses, oh my God, I will take them off. Right, but contacts like, oh my God, I don't like what I'm seeing. Someone who's wearing them right now, right? Like, let me get this out of my eye. I don't think contacts are what we're going to see in our lifetime. I think that's a 40, 50-year adoption. Maybe we will. I'm going to make it to 85, I hope. You know, I think that adoption is decades and decades away. I think you're going to see a wearable glasses, right? We haven't really progressed past contacts on our vision in a very long time. So, and most people can't even put them in their eyes. I just think it's going to be an intersection of glasses with like what OpenAI is working on with the whole, brain chip. Like that's what's going to be the standard for 20 years from today.
I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, which was that you said my team doesn't really let me do design anymore. And I felt like I heard a little bit of sadness in that remark.
It's not sadness. I love what I do. I love coming to the office every Monday, right? Like there's no shortage of sadness in my life. And anytime there is, it's for blip moments. I try to get back on the positive and optimism side. But look, the reality is when you grow a team and you move past yourself, right, that changes. I am the best visionary in the organization. And when I'm in that role, the organization moves forward, things happen, dots connected years ahead. And it sets us up for success month after month. When I have to get dragged into the quote unquote trenches, don't get me wrong, I love being in some of the trenches. I love going over to my Viz team and seeing the cool stuff they're creating virtually and spinning around in like gaming type environments in the computer. I love going on my architects, interior designers, seeing what cool stuff they're coming up with and, watching all that happen. But if I had to worry about the color of brick or what carpet was going into that rendering, etc., nothing would ever get done. And I think that's, as an entrepreneur, and you've learned it, right? Like that's the escape that you truly have to get to as an entrepreneur. You have to be able to go hands off and build and empower a team around you to scale. It's rare that someone built anything of substance by themselves, right? There's that saying, you got to, to go far, you want to go alone. You want to go far, go together or something, right? Like you need a team to empower you to go far. And I think that's something entrepreneurs sometimes never figure out. They say they're an entrepreneur. That's great. But you got to have meaning behind what you're doing. And to truly do that is to build a team and watch that team grow along with your product and your services.
What if you built a team of agents that had they weren't human?
Well, that's what I'm excited for in combining both. I'm excited for what's about to come. And it's crazy. I will predict it within 12 months here. Most operators and entrepreneurs will have virtual agents all around them doing menial tasks. Can you book me meetings with the last top 10 clients in my CRM over the next 10 weeks? Boom, done. It's going to happen, right? Think of it like, right, I want to make sure I buy a Mother's Day, Father's Day, my cousins, all their birthdays, order all their stuff. They like sports. They like the Philly sports teams. Go, boom, done. Does deep research, comes back in 15 minutes. Brian, this is what I'm thinking. Is this good? Yep, check, put it on my Amex. Done. Like that is going to happen rapidly. If you're an executive assistant, don't be worried. Just know that these tools should help you excel the people you're working for. But within 12 months, everyone's going to have their own executive assistant at the highest levels. And that's going to be very, very interesting to see how that frees up some entrepreneurs that can't get out of their own way.
Yeah, I've been exploring how I can build agents for myself, mostly in the realm of executive functions, especially around the scheduling and publishing and managing of the different aspects of the podcast. Because if I do an episode, recording every day, then I have to pull the files off and put them on my cloud and then give the link to my editor. And then when the editor finishes it, I've got to go and create a video description and a thumbnail, concept and titles, which I do with ChatGPT. And then I have to create the thumbnail, but I also have to get a thumbnail from the editor so I can A/B test with an AI versus a human to see which ones the people want to have more. And then I have to toss that into transcript, and I have to put it into the audio hosting platform. So I have to get the MP3 out first. So there's like a lot of things that go into the actual management of a podcast. And I'm doing like 15 to 20 of these a month.
I just want to say that's a great clip to show people how to get 100,000 subscribers to their podcast, because that is work. Most people do not work that hard on their podcast, and that's impressive, number one. But to your point, that will all be automated here within the next 12 to 24 months. You have my word. It is happening. What people are like, everyone, I feel like at this point is open Chat GPT, right? And they're, I don't even use Google search anymore, right? I use Chat GPT as a baseline. If I got to dive into Google, it's because I know what I'm trying to get to. Like I know the name of the company, but I don't know how to spell it. That's when I'm going to Google and I'm finding it that way, right? But what's going to be interesting with these agents that you're talking about, they're going to go off and do things. They're not going to give you an answer in 10 seconds like you're getting it now in ChatGPT. They're going to be like, okay, Sean, okay, Brian, thank you for this information. Here's I have these questions. Great. You're going to give it to them. They'll be like, okay, I'll be back in 30 minutes. And they're going to go out and do deep research. Like what it does in 10 seconds is amazing. Imagine what it will do in 30 minutes. It'll go find every competitor globally. It'll go find every Phillies paraphernalia you can buy, right? Like whatever you want. It'll find it at the highest levels and use other research to inform why that's the best decision. And that's going to truly change the way people run their businesses. It's happening at the highest levels. Where I get nerdy about it is in my profession with like the architectural side. There's 29,000 jurisdictions across the United States, or even more than that. They all have their own nuances of code, zoning, regulations. It's like, how do we consume that information and then put it in meaningful ways to progress drawing sets and make buildings safe? That's where I get excited, because, all right, if I'm about to go into the Atlanta marketplace, I can have my AI agent, or I'm going to call it my zoning and permit agent, go out and do massive research across the zoning and building codes in Atlanta compared to what we're currently doing in Philadelphia, know the differences and provide that data to my team so we don't make mistakes and we can make our buildings safe and reduce change orders in the field. Because we might have missed a code that's only specific to Atlanta, not in Philadelphia. And now that's a change order and I lose a client. But that's going to be a real life example in 12 months how we'll be utilizing AI in our business.